Renowned author Chimamanda has leveled a shocking accusation against a Lagos hospital of negligence after the death of her son in early 2026. Her 21-month-old son, Nkanu Nnamdi, died on January 6th after what began as a brief illness and ended in a circumstances she believes were marked by medical negligence at a Lagos-based hospital. Shockingly, this is not the first time the same doctor has been linked to the death of children under his care at this same hospital. Chimamanda's son, Nkanu, was not just a child. He was a long-awaited miracle. Born in 2024 through surrogacy, he was one of twin boys welcomed by Chimamanda and her husband, Ivara Esege, a medical doctor. His arrival came 8 years after the birth of their first child, a daughter, expanding the family in a way that felt intentional, joyful, and complete. Two new lives entered a home already anchored in love and joy. How did this joy vanish? By the end of 2025, the family traveled to Lagos for Christmas. It was meant to be a season of warmth and reconnection, a chance to slow down, gather with loved ones, and enjoy the family comforts of some. Nothing about the trip suggested danger. Nothing foreshadowed loss. Like many parents of toddlers, Chimamanda noticed what seemed like an ordinary cold. Nkanu was mildly unwell, but there was no immediate alarm. Children get sick, they recover. That assumption carried them forward until it no longer could. The illness progressed quickly and silently, and Nkanu's parents knew he needed medical attention. He was first admitted to Atlantis Hospital in Lagos, where he was evaluated and treated for the cold. Despite the growing concern, the family remains cautiously optimistic. Even then, there was still confidence. A plan had already been arranged for Nkanu to travel to the United States the following day. He was scheduled to fly on January 7th, accompanied by traveling doctors. A specialized medical team at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, United States, was prepared to receive him. Everything had been carefully coordinated. This was not a family caught unprepared. This was a family acting decisively to protect their child. Before the journey, certain procedures were required. Doctors in the USA requested diagnostic tests, including a lumbar puncture and an MRI, to fully assess his condition. A central line was also recommended, a standard preparation for administering intravenous medications during travel, because these procedures required specialized equipment to carry. Atlantis Hospital, which first treated the child's cold, referred the family to Euracare Hospital in Lagos, describing it as the most suitable facility to conduct these procedures. Trust followed that recommendation. In moments of vulnerability, families rely on medical expertise. They assume competence. They assume care. On the morning of January 6th, Chimamanda and her husband left Atlantis Hospital with their son. Nkanu was carried in his father's arms, small and fragile, but still alive, still breathing, still expected to recover. When they got to Euracare, it was explained that sedation would be necessary to prevent movement during the MRI and the insertion of the central line. Chimamanda waited just outside the theater, near enough to feel connected, near enough to believe her presence somehow offered protection, and the atmosphere shifted. Calm dissolved into urgency. She noticed people rushing in and out of the theater, movements too fast, expressions too tense. Before any explanation arrived, instinct told her something had gone terribly wrong. She was later informed that an excessive dose of propofol had been administered. Nkanu had become unresponsive. He had to be resuscitated. That moment marked the point where everything changed. Resuscitation did not bring relief. It brought fear. Her son was suddenly placed on a ventilator, intubated, and transferred to the intensive care unit. He was no longer the little boy who had been carried in that morning. His body began to fail in ways it never had before. Seizures followed, then cardiac arrest. One emergency cascaded into another, stripping away hope piece by piece. The flights to the United States, the waiting doctors, the belief in recovery, all of it quietly disappeared. Hours later, Nkanu was gone. In the days that followed, more troubling details emerged about the cause of his death. It became clear that after the excessive dose of propofol was given, Nkanu was never properly monitored. There was no continuous observation, no vigilant supervision of a sedated child already weakened by illness. Instead, the anesthesiologists casually carried him on his shoulder into the theater. In that careless act, critical minutes were lost. Even after the central line procedure, the same pattern of negligence reportedly continued. Oxygen was switched off without caution. Again, Nkanu was carried on a shoulder, this time towards the ICU, as though his life was not hanging by a thread. No one could determine exactly when Nkanu became unresponsive. No one could say how long this condition went unnoticed. Sedation, particularly in children, requires strict adherence to protocol. It demands constant monitoring, precision, and accountability. These standards exist because children cannot advocate for themselves. Yet, in this case, that responsibility appears to have been abandoned. The family had brought in a child who was unwell but stable. A child is scheduled to travel the next day. A child is expected to survive. They had come for routine preparatory procedures, nothing more, nothing that should have resulted to deaths. What remained was a silence that no parent should ever know. A home forever altered. Chimamanda was left with questions that would not settle and a grief that felt impossible to survive. The image of her husband carrying their son into the hospital became unbearable in hindsight, an act of love that ended in irreversible loss. The grief that followed was not only emotional, it was existential. What compounded the devastation was the discovery that this was not an isolated case. Reports surfaced of other children allegedly harmed under similar circumstances by the same anesthesiologist. Other overdoses, other warnings, questions that now demanded answers. Why was he allowed to continue practicing? Why were earlier incidents not enough to intervene? How many lives were placed at risk through inaction? Nkanu's death became more than a personal tragedy. It became a rupture that demanded accountability, a reminder that a child's life is never routine, never disposable, never something to be handled with casual confidence or professional arrogance. His passing raised urgent questions about medical oversight, responsibility, and the system meant to protect the most vulnerable. This must not happen again. Not to another mother, not to another father, not to another child whose life deserves careful hands and unwavering attention. As public awareness grew, the story moved beyond the hospital walls and into the conscience of the state. Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu ordered a full investigation into the allegations surrounding Nkanu's death. The Lagos State government confirmed it had received a detailed account outlining the circumstances that led to the tragedy. The incident was described as deeply distressing, and condolences were expected to the family, acknowledging that the loss of a child is among the most devastating experiences imaginable. The governor directed the Health Facility Monitoring and Accreditation Agency to immediately commence a comprehensive, independent, and transparent investigation. The probe is expected to examine both the immediate and the underlying causes of Nkanu's death. It will assess whether there are lapses in professional conduct, violations of medical standards, or systemic failures that allowed such negligence to occur. For Chimamanda and her family, no investigation can restore what was lost. No report can fill the space Nkanu once occupied. But truth matters. Accordingly, accountability matters. And beyond one family's grief lies a broader responsibility to ensure that no parent walks into a hospital with hope and walks out carrying sorrow instead. Nkanu's life was brief, but his death has ignited a reckoning, a question that will not fade quietly. How many lives depend on this answer? And will it finally be given?